Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of the W Production Podcast. I'm Dr. John Meis here with my partner, Wendy Briggs. Hey, Wendy, how you doing?
I'm great, Dr. John. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm excited about this topic because it's something that we talk about a lot, and with what's going on in the country and the world today, it's a really, really timely topic. And really, we want to talk about some of the ideas from Adam Grant's new book, Think Again. It's a really great book, and it really illustrates some of the things that we've been demonstrating and teaching to our clients for a long time. And he's such a good writer. He just puts ideas onto paper so well. So,
He sure does.
What were some of the things from the book that you brought out that really resonated with you?
Well, there's so many good gems, and even in just the first chapter, I had a highlighter. And I'm a highlighter and a note taker. I write all throughout books as I read them. And I can tell you in the first, even just in the first 25 pages, I think I used an entire highlighter, right? I ran out of things to highlight, ran out of ink because there were so many things I wanted to highlight. I think probably the thing that stands out to me the most is the humility cycle that he talks about. And I think this is a very, very common thing that we see in human beings, but also in dentists and their teams. The fact that we think we know everything. And when we think we know everything there is to know, that's when we can stumble. And we're seeing a lot of that happening in society right now, not just in dentistry. And he talks about humility cycle and the overconfidence cycle, as well as the importance of being willing to be able to pivot quickly, right? So he shares some really, really great analogies, some of which we'll talk about here today, that I think have valuable lessons for our listeners. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this book is many people that are listening to the podcast may not know our highest levels get a popcorn pouch every quarter. And we choose an inspirational, influential, impactful book to send to them. And we use this book several times throughout the next 3 months. And this was the book we chose. So for those that aren't current members, this is such a powerful book that we actually sent it to all of our highest level members.
Yeah. And the popcorn boxes are fun. They're filled usually with popcorn, some kind of little toy, a book, some ideas. They're just a fun thing that our high level clients get. And this book, in dealing with a lot of advisors to dentists, so this would be attorneys and accountants and finance professionals, they have a way of thinking about us as a profession in that they joke among themselves about us. And the joke is this, that we know a lot about the one topic, dentistry. And we tend to think we know a lot about everything because we know a lot about one topic. And so they all joke about that. But I think it's really good for us to know that is kind of our reputation in the world of advisors around us. And so I think one of the things about this book that I really liked was the focus on curiosity, right? That what you are most sure about, you also have to be most curious about, because you may be 100% certain and 100% wrong. And so there's a lot of stories in the book, and Wendy, you've got a couple that you want to share that really illustrate that.
Yeah, I think, again, we talk about the overthinking cycle and being prideful and seeking validation. We end up in echo chambers, right? So we tend to surround ourselves with other people that validate our beliefs or our positions. And I find that to be very, very common in dentistry and certainly in society right now. People find themselves in an echo chamber of other people that will support their bias or their opinion or their belief. And therefore, we end up with a society of really segmented groups, right? And I see that happening in dentistry where, we've got people that have this overconfidence and maybe doing something the way they've always done it, right? And what that can lead to is really a stumble when they realize, oh gosh, people actually may not want things done that way anymore. And so we see a lot of things like that. One of the stories that stood out to me that was really quite sad was there was a wildfire. I think it was called the Gulch wildfire, and it was a terrible event that happened. And as usual for forest and mountain wildfires, they had smoke jumpers that jumped out of a plane to fight this fire and try to cut it off. And there was an overthinking cycle that happened in the midst of this fire, and these people found themselves in harm's way. And in the book, he talked about how for many of these smoke jumpers, it was drilled into their head that their equipment is precious. Their equipment will save their lives, and so they don't want to drop their equipment or lose their equipment at all. Well, as it turned out in this fire, as things got bad and went from bad to worse, they had to try and outrun the fire. And only one person made it out alive. So it was a horribly tragic event. And when they looked backwards at what they could learn from it, they realized that training of, not losing your equipment, not dropping your saw and all of the axes and all of those things that they used to fight the fire actually cost many people their lives. And the one gentleman who made it out was able to pivot and rethink and realize that this equipment is weighing me down. And if I don't drop it, I'm not going to make it out. And so that's really what saved him, was his ability to rethink and pivot in the moment. And I find that there's some really great analogies to that. Thankfully in dentistry, we aren't often in life or death situations like that. But we do have dentists that approach us that say, that are really in a struggle and going downhill fast. And sometimes what's necessary is they've got to drop that overconfidence and become curious and become humble and be willing to rethink things, doing things the way they've always done them. Right. And I think that can be really, really difficult and challenging for us as professionals, because as human beings, we like to be comfortable and we like to do what we've always done.
A great example of what's happening in dentistry right now, when we talk to practices, they pretty much all will tell us that one of their major challenges is last minute cancels and fails. And I think since COVID, it's worse. It was getting worse already, but I think since COVID, it's worse. And I think people are trying to change their patient's behavior in various ways by kind of spanking the patient if they don't show up for an appointment. But the reality is, nope, society's changed. It's time to pivot. There are other ways to deal with the fact that cancels and fails are higher. We teach several strategies on how to do that. And so it's a good example of people want to keep doing exactly what they're doing, even though the world around them has changed.
Right. And we see that, we talk about strategic thinking versus tactical thinking. And I think sometimes what happens is we get so zeroed in on the tactics that we've done forever, that we lose sight of our strategic thinking, right? We don't understand that we need to take a step back and rethink. And we hear from our teams, right? The teams often don't want to come along. They often say, that's the way we've always done it, or that's not what my experience has shown. He talks about the ignorance of arrogance a lot in this book. And I think that's so true. And we find ourselves surrounded by those echo chambers, right? That support our belief, that support our opinion, that want to blame the patient. Patients are losers, or patients are horrible. And what we really need is to evaluate our systems. And one thing that's really great about that specific example, Dr. John, is how much has changed in recent years, and how many, unique technologies are readily available that can help us pivot and be far more successful in this category alone. But I would say that applies to dentistry as a whole, that we do have opportunities and companies that are being very innovative and exploring technologies that can help us be more successful in spite of today's challenges.
Yeah. So being open to what are new and different ideas, and being able to hold in your mind two things. One, the standard, because if you have a standard that's working, well, you don't want to lose that. But at the same time, evaluating new technologies, new techniques, new philosophies, because what did work may not work in the future, or may not work as well as something else that's available right now.
Yeah. One thing that he says, a lot of companies that have a downfall or that fail, we could list a whole bunch of them, right? Polaroid, Kodak, BlackBerry, all of these companies, Blockbuster, failed to adapt to the market. And he said, adapting to a changing environment is something a company does, right? It's something people do in the multiple decisions they make every day. And so recognizing that the company, you can't choose to adapt, right? You can't make a decision that we're going to adapt. It's your people that actually have to carry that through in the decisions that they're making every single day on how they're going to operate at a higher level, how they're going to overcome, the changing environment. What are we going to do differently day in and day out? And I think that's really a telling comment, is that the company can't necessarily make the decision. The people have to every single day. So part of the book is how we create an environment where people can rethink. And we make it part of our culture that we want them to rethink. Steve Jobs also had a great comment that he quoted that is, we don't hire people and tell them what to do. We hire people and have them tell us what to do. And when I look at dentistry as a whole, that's the last thing we do, right? We hire our people, we onboard, we tell them exactly how we want things done. And we rarely have an opportunity to say, hey, what new ideas do you have? Or is there anything that you think we should do differently or better? And I think sometimes it's funny because we often hear from team members that are annoyed that the new hire wants to tell them how they always did it at their other practice, right? So it becomes almost the antithesis of what we build in dentistry.
Yeah, I always tell new employees that learn to do it, learn our systems, and once you learn them, help us make them better. So kind of in that order. So otherwise, new people can bring a lot of chaos. But if we're not open to their ideas, their suggestions, and them helping us get it better, then we can be stagnant. And you and I have seen it so many times, Wendy, when the whole team is screaming, what we're doing is really stupid, and we're driving away patients, and we don't even know that we're doing it, or the doctor doesn't know that we're doing it, and the doctor says, no, this is the way I was taught. I went to this institute. They said to do it exactly this way, and they blindly follow that. So having the openness and the curiosity to think about the things that you don't know, and know that there's a lot more things that you don't know, right? So you have to really be curious.
And I think part of our success within the Team Training Institute is helping providers cultivate that in their patients, right? And helping the patients understand that there may be more to their dental health than they even know, right? So causing the patient to rethink what they've always done and doing things differently, which is why we teach a process for risk assessment, which is why we have tools that we help empower hygienists with to have vital conversations. Let's talk about the pH in your oral environment. Let's talk about some of your habits. Let's talk about doing something differently in the future so that we can have a better future than what we've struggled with in the past. And I think that's why I think this book resonated so well with us, is because we see it such a necessary tool for many in dentistry to have today, not simply for their own perspective, but to help cultivate and guide that level of humility and curiosity in our patients. That's often something that can be really challenging at first if you don't follow a proven system to help patients understand that there could be more for them, for their health, if they are willing to do something different.
Yep. And that the tricks that we teach in our retreats and our case acceptance course, we have that coming up here in a couple of weeks. It's sold out again this year. It always is. It's, part of that is creating that curiosity in the patient, right? And doing that with risk assessments, with charts, with making their problems visual, now using artificial intelligence to point things out and to grab the patient's attention. It's really an exciting time in dentistry right now.
It is. And I think, even though we hear from practices and doctors who are stressed, there's a lot of things that they're worried about. I saw a recent survey done, and they said, okay, what are the top concerns that you have? And of course, rising costs were right up there. Reduction of insurance reimbursement rates were right up there. Dental industry changing. So the corporate takeover and DSOs, it's fascinating. Really, Dr. John, these are things that 5 years ago, dentists were concerned about the same exact things.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like this cycle that doesn't ever quite go away. And what I love about the dentists that we work with is their willingness to think again and adapt and to pivot. And the fact that even though these are very common concerns, they don't allow it to be an excuse or a reason for why their practice isn't performing at the level that they think it could be, right? Instead of, I guess, using that as an excuse, they're using it as fuel to empower themselves and their teams to figure out, okay, what do we need to do differently? How can we pivot? How can we serve our patients at a higher level in spite of, rising costs and inflation and concerns that way? And as you mentioned, at our case acceptance course, we have doctors go back and implement what they learn and have a 40% bump, in spite of rising costs and all of these things. We did one during COVID, and we still saw an increase. And so I think that's just proof that being willing to be humble and pivot and work through some of the fears, not allow the fears to hold you back, is what many of us in our profession actually need.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So it's a really critical time right now because there's so many distractions from patient care and from having great patient experiences. And, you mentioned several of them, but, we could make a long list. We're just before the election now, and so much noise around that, and the stock market's variability, and had the best October ever, but it's still, people have the sense that it's doom and gloom. And interest rates are high. We can go on and on and on about all these things. But because there's changes in the world around us, we have to adapt, we have to be open, we have to be curious, and we have to lead others in that same thing.
Yeah. Before we're done today, Dr. John, it's been a great conversation, great content. And again, we can't recommend enough the book Think Again by Adam Grant. A lot of really great gems in there. But we also have some exciting announcements of our own. So we have something that we've never done before, and we are going to be having a summit launch party coming up soon. So watch for that. Why don't we do this on our homepage? We'll go ahead and put in the show notes a link so you can get information about our summit as well as the launch party. So we will be making some really exciting announcements about our Summit 2023. It's going to be the end of April, and we are holding this amazing summit in Orlando. So one of the things that we're going to be doing in Orlando is helping practices unlock the magic. That's our theme for this year. So that's an exciting announcement. And so watch for that information. Again, if you're looking for inspiration on how to handle things in your practice at a different level, there's no better place to go than the summit for that type of focus and inspiration and rethinking. All of our speakers really will bring an incredible amount of energy and solutions to common frustrations and challenges in dentistry.
Yeah, it's going to be an awesome event, as it is every year. This one, I think, will be even more special and just a little bit more magic.
And to find out why, join us for that lunch party. It's going to be great.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks, Wendy. Thanks, everybody, for being on this episode of the W Production Podcast. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.